Welcome to Chalk and Code,
where the science of learning meets modern technology.
We're bringing together entrepreneurs, product leaders, researchers, and advocates
to spark ideas, challenge assumptions, and shape the future of learning.
Welcome back to Chalk and Code, the show where we sit down with bold thinkers and leaders that are shaping the future of education through technology. I'm your host, Jennilee Bertrand, and today we're excited to chat with Nolan Frausto. He is the Chief Technology Officer at AdaptedMind, a K-6 personalized learning platform used by more than 2 million parents across nearly 200 countries. As the CTO, he oversees engineering, systems scalability, adaptive learning technology, payment infrastructure, and technical decisions that has supported the company's growth. Welcome, Nolan. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You've worked in multiple domains. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey into the edtech world?
Yeah, so my journey is largely kind of spans a variety of industries, eventually landing on edtech. But I started off consulting, working for companies like Bloomberg in the finance industry, working for places in the event space industry, working for fitness technology at a company that eventually got acquired by Fitbit. So kind of spanned a variety of industries, eventually landed at AdaptedMind in edtech, and really kind of found my fit there. And, ever since then, that's where I've been. And I find the blend of, creativity and learning, especially because we teach younger children, it's very whimsical at times, and I find it very delightful.
Yeah. Do you have any unique engineering lessons that you bring from past fields to edtech?
I think on the engineering side, largely what you focus on: stability, you focus on scalability, you focus on how you communicate and grow teams. That is all somewhat the same industry over industry. So you bring that expertise with you, and what especially early education at AdaptedMind kind of lends itself to is a lot more creativity. So instead of like a form on a page, you have stars flying across the screen and monsters moving around, and videos playing to teach math. So the kind of the focus of the technology stack is a little different than other industries, but it's been very enjoyable.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. So you've publicly discussed your experience leading a complete software system rewrite at AdaptedMind. I can only imagine, right, that was quite a challenge to navigate the complexity of deciding whether to maintain legacy code or to build from scratch. What were some key warning signs that told you AdaptedMind's code base needed to be rebuilt rather than refactored?
Yep. So I'll start with saying that my initial approach is always refactor, build on top of what's already there. It's easy to come in and say, "Hey, let's throw this all away and start fresh." And that's not what I would kind of give advice to do. So why did I choose to do that in this instance? Um, AdaptedMind, when I joined in 2020, was going through, the pandemic, which a lot of edtech industry especially saw kind of massive change in scale. So I was brought in to help manage that scale, grow the team, so on and so forth. And hopping in there, the founders had created a platform that was profitable, sustainable, and growing over the course of 10 years prior to my joining. And that 10-year journey involves a lot of struggle, a lot of throwing things at the wall, a lot of moving wildly a little bit. And the code base kind of just, year over year just builds on all of that kind of, wild throwing things at the wall. So it more specifically, diving in to the data to the code, to the technologies being used that were in many cases end of life. It just made sense that if we want to, going off of this great foundation and great company that has been created, if we want to keep scaling, keep growing, keep launching new product lines, the best option would be to take what we have working and create that from a very, very solid foundation so that we can build even more on top of it.
Did you find any unexpected challenges that through that transition? And actually, how long did it take?
Yeah, it took about a year and a half. And There's always unexpected challenges along the way. A full code rebuild, full DB structure rebuild, a full hosting rebuild, a full, everything rebuild is no small undertaking. And you'll see at some companies, it never completes. So you live in this half world for a long time. So decision was made very intentfully to finish this, to follow through with it, and it be the top priority um, for a period of over a year, which is no small commitment.
Right.
During the rebuild as well, we had to make sure everything's up and running. We can still launch new features, try new things. And we had some goals along with it in the supporting an app, which we did launch last year on both Android and iOS. So there were some kind of key things we wanted to be able to build on. That'd be very difficult with the previous code base and grow a team against. So um, challenges along the way for sure, but really just sticking with it and not losing the focus helped us kind of get past it and move forward in
Yeah,
a very stable manner.
for sure. Definitely set the foundation, I'm sure, for much better things to come. Um, Yeah, so you've written about the boring stack philosophy, the idea that keeping technology simple and well established creates space for products to be interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more about the boring stack philosophy?
Yeah, as engineers, we love to build things. We love to use cool technologies. Hop on the latest trends. AI being one
Right.
that I'm sure we'll talk to later in a little bit here. But that's fun. That's part of why engineers are engineers in many cases. So there's a bit of kind of pushing against that instinct and saying, okay, what's the most boring way we can do this? Rather than making, because more complexity, it takes more time to do things. It's harder to understand where things break if they break, and when things go down, it's harder to fix. So, what's the simplest way to do something? And what's the simplest stack you can create that accomplishes your goal, so you can focus on the business needs and growing the product at the end of the day, which is what it's all about. So, for example, we are hosted on AWS right now, um, and we use some very, very basic services. There's a lot of complex things in the AWS ecosystem now, but we use their database, we use their servers, and a few other, CloudFront and other features, but kind of the basics of the basics. So when AWS went down, I think it was maybe a month ago or so, on US East especially, we were unaffected because a lot of the services that went down were they're more complex ones. So we managed to stay up during that time.
Yeah, that's impressive because a lot of people did not.
Yeah, yeah.
um, can you talk a little bit about like maybe how did you bring that? Because that's a different way of thinking, right? So how did your engineers respond to the boring stack philosophy? And are most people, I guess, on board with that ideas?
Yeah, most people are on board, in the big scheme of things when you say it. But, the day to day when something new comes out, it's like, why aren't we, using Kubernetes to do this? Why aren't we hosted on this and doing, those do come up pretty consistently, and you have to just consistently push back and say, we don't need that right now. Maybe if XYZ happens, we'll look at it then. But for our goals right now, it's just not needed. But it's a constant pushback.
Yeah. Is it sort of built into your culture?
It is now. And it's built into my personal philosophy as well. Having dealt with complex systems that go down in some way, having, lived those experiences, uh, it's not worth it. So you
Yeah.
want to focus on building things, on writing clean code, and you don't want to be focused on, how X component relates to Y component in this database versus that database. You don't want to get into that spider web of complexity, which is very easy to fall into.
Yeah. No, it's really refreshing to hear a CTO talk like that. So appreciate that. So you've led some implementation of the strike billing at AdaptedMind. That was it transforms how the company manages subscriptions, failed payment recovery, and fraud prevention globally. Why did you decide to make that switch from your legacy billing provider to Stripe?
So this was not actually my decision. That said, I would make that decision. So previously, AdaptedMind was hosted on PayPal, um, and it got to the point where the technologies we were using weren't really built for subscription services at the time. Um, and they weren't really developer first. So and we were getting a lot of weird chargeback issues, which we didn't know where or why when we tried to dig in. It just didn't make sense. And PayPal was very unhelpful, where Stripe was very helpful. So they kind of had a team. They guided us through the transition process. They kind of helped figure out like, okay, here's how the dispute process works or chargeback process works. And after we moved, we saw just a drastic reduction in that, and then a lot of very developer friendly tools to go along with it. So that if you do want to implement something, the documentation is very clear, it's very easy to find, and it's very easy to implement at the end of the day. And so, very happy with that choice.
Was there a cost savings to it at all?
I wouldn't say a direct cost savings.
Sure.
But a cost savings in terms of time management, in terms of tool, like just, at the high level, yes. But like if you're comparing percentages and things like that of the direct payment providers themselves, no.
All right. How has improving the payment recovery and fraud prevention impacted AdaptedMind's business and customer service satisfaction?
Yep. So, we have a very good customer service team. We create a lot of, using Stripe technologies and other things, we create a lot of admin tools for them to help our customers and be very generous when we can. So that has been very helpful in terms of, if someone can't afford AdaptedMind but really loves it, just give it to them free and have a button that does that for them. The kind of satisfaction in terms of being able to reliably, cancel payments. We do things around school years that, sometimes people for edtech especially, you want to use it during the school year, or you want to use it during summer, or you're very specifically tied to kind of this yearly cycle for earlier ages, especially. And so we implemented tools on our end to say like, okay, pause during, this 3 months, pause during the summer months, pause during school year, and it'll reactivate when you need it. So kind of meeting the customer where they are, and just having the developer tools to make that not a painful process and not a manual process in some cases. You always have to code against it, but the easier that can be, the simpler that can be, the more reliable it can be. And we've achieved a great reliability there.
Do you have any other advice for edtech leaders about choosing a payment infrastructure that would be able to grow their business?
Yeah, I think the main point would be not always choosing the tool that upfront will give you like save you a percent or save you a half a percent. Or, there's some of these economies of scale, those percents and half a percents matter quite a bit. But within reason, choosing the tool that is the easiest. Again, kind of going back to the boring stack, the simplest. If you can make complexity simple in some way, shape, or form, that's kind of always my default route in any decision. Because complexity just grows and grows, and it's kind of like this unstoppable beast once it gets going. And so, a lot of my job, actually, now that I think about it, is just managing complexity and trying to reduce it across the board wherever you see it. And because it'll introduce itself, it'll try to introduce itself in all shapes and sizes, in all forms. So recognizing it and taking preventative steps, making choices on what billing providers or infrastructure tools or coding languages even that you choose to reduce that in the future.
All right, let's switch topics to AI because everybody wants to talk about it. So you discussed in podcast prior how AI must be integrated thoughtfully into the education technology, highlighting the tension between creating engaging features and ensuring educational efficacy. What conversations are you currently having with educators and parents about AI's role in their child's learning?
So AI, it's the hot topic. Everyone's trying to squeeze it in wherever you can. And kind of again to the approach I mentioned before, we are definitely keeping our eye on it, but we're not immediately trying to just throw it places because, especially for early childhood learning, it hallucinates. It could say the wrong thing. 1+1 = 5. So we want to be very, very careful, especially with communicating with kids. how we utilize it for a consumer-facing features. So we're keeping our eye on using it in some ways to, we do progressive learning, adaptive learning per student. So how can it be utilized better for that in a very safe way? But more kind of immediately, how can we utilize it to scale our team in a lot of ways? So we have a team of animators and artists because we produce our own videos and we have our own characters, that travel through time and learn history lessons, or learn how the brain grows and how to deal with kind of more emotional problems. Um, so how can we utilize it for our animators to make them be able to create episodes easier? How can we utilize it for science videos so that we can create more science videos, more content generation? And then, how can our engineers use it? What tool? We're using pretty much all of them right now because it changes almost on a weekly basis. Which one is good? Which one is bad? Or, it's a bit of a race. So what tools can we use to help in our own coding practices? So it's really more internal right now that we're focusing on it. And then kind of waiting for the right external avenue for it. Where, throwing a chatbot to a preschooler isn't like, it's not really helpful to them. It doesn't really change too much when you're learning colors, when you're learning counting, when you're learning addition. You have to be very careful about how AI could enhance that.
Yeah.
Later grades, you can write essays and kind of ask questions to it, but very early learning is very specific and very thoughtful and intentful, at least the way we approach it. There's only so many good ways to teach very early concepts. We want to be careful with what we introduce to our children at the
Yeah.
end of the day.
I really appreciate the caution that y'all are taking, especially with, children that are that young. Where do you see AI's role in edtech evolving, maybe in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, right now, I know for later grades, it's already evolving, and a lot of students use it to help write essays. A lot of teachers use it to help do curriculum. So that's another avenue that we are thinking of exploring. Less on the child side, more on the adult side. Help you generate curriculum, help you generate content yourself, and how will it evolve in the early learning space? Where imagine a 4-year-old or 3-year-old. You can kind of read. You can maybe, depending on your age, you can do simple math. How are you going to be leveraging AI? More, we have characters that we have on our screen, so maybe they can be interactive characters that make the experience more fun, where we tightly control the learning and try to optimize that for individual students. But maybe the funness, the game experience of it, which we're very careful to balance with the learning, um, can be more engageful, more engaging, and even more educational. So there's a lot of avenues that it could grow into, and it's people talk about AI bubble, um, kind of like the early internet. There's a bubble for sure, but there's some staying power as well.
Yeah.
So where it all lands, just keeping a very close eye on and not trying to jump the gun and be cautious without being too cautious.
Right. Well, can you tell us a little bit about AdaptedMind, and I guess what's the newest, best, fun thing that you're working on right now, and maybe some things that you have upcoming?
Yeah, yeah. So, like you mentioned, we are pre-K to sixth, and we actually go up to eighth grade. But our core demographic is that like pre-K to third grade, fourth grade, elementary school age. Um, and what we're doing is trying to make the learning more engaging. So there's three types of learning that we like to focus on: auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. So how can we create products that meet the child with whatever type of learning they're best at is a constant thing we're focusing on and trying to do. And right now, especially, how can we make it more engaging for them without going too much on the gaming side? So it's always a balance between education and gaming. A lot of our competitors are pretty much games with very little learning. They call themselves edtech, but it's really just a game that parents can kind of maybe feel good about and kids kind of get addicted to. But you're not learning; you're just actually getting screen time with no benefit. So we really want to be crystal clear on the benefit we're giving. Much unlike many other products, we actually limit screen time, where many of our competitors, what are you trying to optimize? Screen time, engagement, but there's a level for learning where it's not helpful anymore. So how can we manage that as well? So it's this very kind of tightrope that we're walking of how can we make it engaging and fun so the child wants to do it. How can we make it educational? And one of our most core concepts is how can we make learning fun? So whether you learn 1+1, whether you learn fractions, whether you learn all these things, great if you do. But if you learn a love of learning, that's the thing we really want to have. So we think about that constantly, and we really and as what we're doing is we're looking at the gaming side right now, making it more interactive, more fun, um, but really balancing that with the learning. So that's kind of our current push to improve the engagement without sacrificing the learning, without focusing too much on screen time. So we're pretty excited. In the next few months, we'll be launching kind of some new product experiences that try to do that. And that's kind of the current focus across all of our platforms.
Very nice. Very nice. Could you talk a little bit more? And you sort of mentioned it already, but like some of the challenges that you're seeing. You talked about like your competitors being basically games, right? And what you're doing to avoid falling into that sort of trap.
Yep. So yeah, we many of our competitors are actually pretty much games. Like if you go on the App Store and look at education, and you look at some of the top early kind of age games or educational games, so they say, and you download them and play them. Sometimes you're just asking you like, where am I learning? Actually, what is even the learning part of this? And it's maybe buried somewhere very, very deep, but it's not there for all intents and purposes. So we try to be very careful there, and it's a very hard balance, because one of our biggest complaints is you get locked out at a certain point. So how can we meet the parent as well with what their needs, meet the child with their needs, without just creating some very dopamine heavy, rewarding system that is not healthy for a learning, growing brain. And it's not easy,
Yeah.
but I really do believe we do a great job of it compared to pretty much all of our competitors. And it's something we constantly focus on. We have a team of people who, we have teachers who help us out with our curriculum. We have a lot of people who have in the edtech space. A lot of our engineers or some of our engineers have previously worked in other edtech companies. So the passion is there for sure. And people will push back and say like, hey, because we have a very open culture, like, hey, this actually I don't think is good. I don't, they may be too comfortable pushing back in some senses, but that's kind of the culture we've created, and that's at the end of the day what makes me excited to show up every single day. And we see when we do user interviews, and you're on a call with the child, and it's just fun. Like they're just having so much fun, and that's just so rewarding. They're like doing somersaults in the background and just running up and like on the screen. It's just, previously in other industries, it's very, very buttoned up. This is just very silly almost, but it's very rewarding. So we really want to help children love to learn and not help them get addicted to screens. We are a screen, our apps, our website, which isn't necessarily bad because they're very engaging things. But how can you utilize that power in the best possible way? And that's some of our differentiating aspects to AdaptedMind.
Looking back at your career from software engineer to now CTO, what was a pivotal moment for you, or a decision that shapes how you lead today?
Yeah, so I think throughout my career, I worked, again, as I mentioned, a variety of industries and a variety of roles, pretty much from junior to here, across large companies, small companies, giant finance companies, fitness companies. I started my own startup in community focused startup called Warm Intro as well. That was a big decision that ultimately did not pan out, but I think that kind of set the stage for the love of leading companies, leading teams, and building things you believe in. And being able to join AdaptedMind when I did, which was at a very, very high growth phase, very pivotal phase, I think shaped a lot of all that experience was now kind of there to build on and shape the way the team grows, work with the founders, work with the team members in a way that we now have a company of amazing people, and we're, doing amazing things every day. And such a solid foundation, from the culture, from the code, from kind of all the above to build upon now. And it's just very exciting for the future.
Yeah. So, where can folks find you or reach out to you?
You can find me on LinkedIn or trying to think. Yeah, LinkedIn would be the place. If you look up Nolan Frausto, send me a message.
All right.
I'm located. We're in the Bay Area.
Okay. Any final advice, final words to close us out?
I think the final thought that I would want to leave with is, the turning complexity into simplicity. Where constantly across how your teams communicate, across how your code is structured, across your infrastructure, across even your product. So how can you make simple or complex things simple is a very hard problem, but it's a very valuable thing across every single piece of a company.
Yep.
And that is my focus day in and day out.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Nolan. Really appreciate the conversation. And thanks for joining this episode of Chalk and Code. We'll see you at the next one. Thanks for tuning in. If today's conversation sparked new insights or challenged your thinking, we'd love to hear from you.
Visit flexion.us for more information and join us here next time on Chalk and Code.